economy, we all gained a better appreciation of the challenges that we face at both a global as well as at a local level in our own economy. We then got a briefing from the Minister of Trade and Industry in relation to the 9-point plan, setting out how government is responding to the challenges that our country is facing. The 9-point plan specifically focusing on what we need to do and is being done in agriculture and particularly in agro-processing, that through agriculture we'll be able to generate growth, and through agro-processing we'll be able to create a number of jobs, and a lot of work is being done there. We also got a briefing as part of the 9-point plan on IPEP, the industrial plan that the country has, and also looked at the number of investments that have come through, particularly in the automotive sector and the various subsectors, and the number of jobs that have also been maintained and created. We looked at the work that is being done in the mineral beneficiation area, how we're beginning to move up the ladder in terms of focusing on beneficiating our minerals, and also looked at how we can use the SME sector to support small and medium enterprises to generate growth and jobs in our economy. And we also, as part of that briefing, looked very closely at the work that is being done with the oceans economy and how we have injected more energy and growth in the oceans economy to a point where we're beginning to make tugboats, which we're beginning to export to a number of countries. We looked at energy as well, what we're doing there, but we also looked at workplace stability, the task that the President gave the Deputy President together with NEDLEC to work on, particularly with regard to the national minimum wage and stabilizing the workplace in relation to strikes and the longevity of strikes. We also looked at how further investment can be generated from the private sector. So all that was appreciated by all in the meeting, that the government indeed is responding and taking action to address the economic challenges that our country faces at this point in time. The colleagues in Labour, each federation was able to table the various issues that they had, but they had one consolidated presentation that raised a number of issues that they as Labour felt need to be addressed. All of them collectively raised the issue of the need for creating more jobs, the need to retain the jobs that many of our working people have, and what now needs to be done to make sure that we create more and more jobs. That was heartening to hear Labour coming up with a number of proposals in that regard. They also raised the issue of a new wage policy that our country should have. It's a matter that will be addressed. They also raised the issue of the social security system that South Africa needs to have to lighten the burden on ordinary people from a social security point of view. There was also appreciation of the progress that is being made at the NEDLEC level on the national minimum wage issue. We appreciated that the negotiations and the discussions are going on, and all parties at the meeting felt that given all these issues, there is a greater need to work together, to have a partnership between Labour and government and indeed business. We were able to reflect on past precedents in regard to how, when we work together as Labour, business and government, we are able to achieve a great number of good things. For instance, we were able to travel together with the Minister of Finance as Labour, government and business to New York, to London, to address investors, and we had a common narrative we were able to put a common story across to the investors. And that in many ways contributed to our country not being downgraded to junk status. So that was recalled with a great deal of appreciation. And we felt that we should use that culture of working together to address a number of other issues. And to this end, it was then decided that we should set up a 10-person committee, which would be composed of government at the ministerial level, as well as 2 each from the 3 federations, that they should get together and work on the issues that were identified. And the issues that were identified clearly were issues such as jobs, issues such as a new wage policy, issues social security, as well as how we could find ways of monitoring the implementation of policies, particularly labor market policies, so that the laws and the policies that have been put in place are properly implemented and make sure that the laws are also observed. We also reflected on the call that has been made by labor to have a job summit. The meeting felt that a job summit is needed. Labor has called for a job summit, and as government we agreed indeed that there should be a job summit. So this will now be arranged by this 10-person committee so that we have a job summit to allow South Africans to be able to have a conversation on the issue of jobs and how we can create jobs and generate growth in our economy. And we also felt that we should find ways of intervening in an area like the informal economy. There was a view that the informal economy is very large, and we should find ways of monitoring it, of measuring it, and also of giving support to the key players in the informal economy, because they contribute in our economy on an overall basis. So all in all, this was a very positive meeting. All of us leave this meeting very encouraged that as South Africans, we are able to get together and address challenging problems. And with common purpose, with a shared vision, we are able to find solutions. And we will continue to find solutions because we only have one South Africa, one economy, and we want to advance the interests of our people and create jobs. And this morning's meeting takes place against the backdrop of what has been happening in Tshwane. All of us expressed our deep concerns about the reports that we are hearing and the visions that the whole country is seeing with the destruction of property, vehicles, and attack on government facilities. And we want to call on our people here in Tshwane, the various structures that we have, that violence is not the way of addressing problems. If there are problems, we need to sit down and discuss those problems. So we condemn acts of violence in the strongest terms. And all of us collectively as government and labor felt very, very strongly about this and call on our people to stay calm, to desist from violence, and not even be tempted by anyone to participate in acts of violence. And to those who are perpetrating violence, we say to you, the security forces in our country, the police, are on hand to make sure that, one, we do not perpetrate acts of violence against anyone. And if you do perpetrate acts of violence, you're violating the rights of other people, and you shall be arrested. This has to be a very clear message coming from the meeting that we've just had, that South Africa does not tolerate violence, and we call on all our people in Tshwane to desist from violence and to find ways, better ways of addressing the problems and the challenges that we face. The issue of mayoral candidates is a matter that needs to be discussed. And we're very, very concerned that this whole problem is beginning to acquire tribalistic type of tones, where it is suggested that somebody who was born in another province but lives in a city, in a metro like Pretoria, should not be a mayoral candidate of Tshwane. Now, this goes against the values that we have always sought to embrace as a people and as a nation. And we say, let us uphold our values that are deeply embedded in our Constitution. Let us practice them, because it is important that we as South Africans should act as one and be truly non-racial and be truly democratic and be united in everything that we do. Thank you very much.
We'll take questions. I understand there are 4 questions. Yes, yes, Machula, do you have
Thank you. My name is Tshwane. I'm from The Citizen. And I wanted to ask if it was at all discussed in the meeting, the issue of the so-called youth wage subsidy and the targets that had been set in putting that policy together, that the target for job creation was 423,000. And I wanted to know how far government was in reaching that goal for this year, and if they perhaps want to set new targets, and how are they going to take this youth wage subsidy forward in culminating it into job creation for young people.
Karine du Plessis, I'm writing for News 24. My question is, it's related to the last point you made, Deputy President, on the violence in Tshwane. I just want sort of two related questions. Are there talks of deploying the army to quell the violence and the unrest, and also the concerns for the outcome of the elections? If the violence is like this now, are there concerns that it could be worse after the elections, and are there ways of, is there a plan to curb it? I mean, this also speaks to investor confidence, so I'm sure it's related to the labour issue in a way.
I'm Morgan from SABC. My question is directed to the Labour leaders. First, if you can just explain this concept of or this call of for a new wage policy. What does that mean exactly? What are we talking about? And the agreement to hold the job summit, how significant a victory is that for you? Considering that you have been, especially COSATU, you've been pushing for this thing for years now.
The issue of a youth wage subsidy was not specifically discussed. When we discuss the issue of unemployment, clearly we also focus on the issue of youth unemployment, recognizing that many young people in our country are currently unemployed, and we've got to make all efforts to make sure that we create jobs that will bring young people into the job market. So if you look at it broadly in that context, yes, the issue of youth unemployment is a matter that is high on our agenda, even though we did not discuss the youth wage subsidy specifically, nor did we discuss the targets that have either been set in place in the past or in the future. The real target really is to have all our young people to be in employment. That is what we focus on as government and as Labour as well. Have we considered calling in the army? No. We believe that the situation can be contained, can be currently we've got a lot of structures, political structures, that are busy talking to our people, addressing our people to come down. And we hope that this will be a process that will bear fruit. Our people are not violent by nature, and we're hoping that as they are talked to and as meetings happen and as the leaders address this problem with our people, there will be a sense of calm that will come down. Will this have an impact on investor confidence? I believe that it should not affect it negatively. This is a process of people exercising their democratic rights to protest, but obviously we want people to protest without resorting to violence. Violence is something that we should not resort to as South Africans, and we're hoping that this situation will be brought under control fairly soon so that we move on. Will it have an impact on the elections and the election outcome? I'd like to believe that once this quietens down, the election will be able to proceed as planned. We still have some way to go, and when our people have a better understanding of the reasons and the need to have deployed a person like Toko Didiza as the mayoral candidate of Tshwane, they'll be able to come down and be disciplined and be able to have this matter properly addressed and resolved in the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I will take a bite on the question raised by Mr. Mutwa. But before that, just to labor the point a bit, because when violence and these activities that are happening around here have an impact on people going to work and unable to do work, it does have a direct impact on the economy, but also that employers tend to take actions against those that were not able to come to work, despite of the fact that they would have been not able to go there because there was violence and they feared for their lives. So that's why as Labour, jointly with government, we have made this call that this should come to an end and people should exercise their right to demonstrate, but peacefully, respecting other people's rights, but also observing processes of dealing with issues where there are issues. On our call for a wage policy and the call for the Jobs Summit, we believe that the Jobs Summit, as the progress work culmination, is a point where we would have highlighted for the whole country to be aware of what we're doing, but unleashing a program on how we're dealing with the problem and the challenge that we are facing. It's a very, very important process. You can do it as much as you can, as long as there is a need. In the history of our country, the last time we had a jobs summit, it was in 2003, by the way. 2003, we had the job summit, and out of it came out a range of policy injunctions, and we have to then go back to say what has worked, what has not worked, and what are we going to do to ensure that there's proper implementation for job creation and decent job creation. The wage policy, there is what we need to highlight when we're raising that point, because we always narrowly look into the situation in the form of the monthly salary, and we ignore the other issues, which is what we're seeking to raise now. We are, at the moment, in our statement, raising the issue of the wage policy with the conclusion of a discussion on the comprehensive social security, with a discussion around the national minimum wage, with a lot of other injunctions, including what already is happening, the grants that government is providing. You put a totality of all those things. You then can say, at least we have a system, a wage policy in our country that is able to protect those who have been falling within the cracks of the economy. That's what we are raising as a point when we're saying we need in South Africa to have negotiations about a new wage structure, a new wage policy, which protects or aims to protect those who have not been able to. When we going over this weekend to discuss the national minimum wage, it's an addition to that debate. So it's not about just the wages or the salary. We're expanding this to be forming a security net in our country where we can stay assured that at least the majority, if not all, are protected, whether they are employed, whether they are not employed, but to have a system that protects or aims to protect everybody.
Colleagues, as well, what we don't want to have is a talk shop. We have established a 10-persons committee that will be looking at agreements made, laws that are in place to ensure, are they working? If they are not working, what else can we do to improve there? Somebody is asking, I mean, President Duma has already elaborated on the job summit. You remember in 1998 and follow up in 2003, we had a job summit that had good results. Some of them we need to make follow-ups, and there's a learning curve as we move together and ensure that we are taking the nation forward. That 10-person committee will look at timeframes on issues that are on the table. How do we do? How do we move together to ensure that as a nation, together with government and business, of course, we move together to ensure that we take our nation up? Because you need growth. I think you will hear very soon that the economic growth may even be less than 0.9. We don't need that. We need more. But how can we do that? We can do that by working together, ensuring that we implement policies, policy agreement on a time-frame basis.
Good afternoon. Fedusa also want to strongly condemn these acts of violence that's taking place. It really, takes away from our democracy in the country, that people feel that they can just, burn and so on. And it's for that reason that we call on the police to take swift action to deal with the perpetrators that, embarrasses us. Because, it's not necessary. We've got structures. We can talk to one another. So it's totally unacceptable. I also just wanted to talk about, you asked a question about the new wage policy. Now, what we've done was this. We've looked at how the income was split. In other words, how much money went to profits and how much money went to income for workers. And what we have found that there was a 5% decline in income that goes to working people in South Africa. And the profits for companies have increased with 5%. So from that analysis, we felt that it is important to address the issue of working poverty. We find people working, but they don't earn enough so that they can provide for their families. And that is not acceptable. You have a situation, even when a person is a teacher, the cost of living for that person is so high that they can't even afford to purchase their own house. And it's important for any democracy that we must bring equity in the economy, and that's the reason why inclusive economic growth is critically important. The issue of comprehensive social security and the job summit, it's a fantastic new opportunity for us as government and business and labor to come together and work to find creative solutions, to see what things have been working. I mean, I can just point back to you. You remember when we had our previous job summit, we've asked all the workers to give 1 day of their wages. That money was placed in a trust. From that trust, we think, President Seduma, I think we've collected 94 million. And from that monies that we collected, we then, as labor, gave those monies to rural communities where people want to start vegetable gardens, to start, their own small businesses. And we gave them loans, we gave them grants, and that fund still have about more than 60 million rand in the stuff. So I think it's important that we must look what South Africans can do to deal with poverty and unemployment and inequality. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy President. I thought that I was not going to respond to any questions. But on the issue of a new wage policy, as you know that we had the International Labour Organization conference in June. There were issues that were discussed that relates to global supply chain, of which that will form part of the new wage policy. But at the same time, on the social comprehensive social security review, we have already dealt with the discussion document, and that document is led by the Treasury and Social Development, and also Department of Labor, Department of Health, and of Transport. They are part of that social security review. And therefore, when you link that with also the taxation laws that were tabled at NEDLAC, that will form that comprehensive social security review. So it's part of the issues that we're saying. Let us have a job summit to discuss on how we should confront those challenges that we're faced with, but at the same time, give a full program on what the government has done, particularly when you look also at the informal sector, because last year we had a resolution that was taken by the ILO, of which organized labor, organized business, and government did participate. And therefore, as we know that on Thursday, that will be the first meeting that will be held in Bloemfontein to start the discussions on that particular matter, and of which, therefore, that will allow a situation where during the job summit, the proper progress report will be given by the relevant departments. So DTI and the Department for Small Business Development has started to look at the transition from informal to formal economy. And therefore, those are the issues that we think that they will take forward, some of these issues in the job summit. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Deputy President. Colleagues, that brings us to the end of this. Thank you.
You can go home now.
The joint statement you can collect from me. Joint.
Good afternoon. Well, those were live visuals from the Union Buildings in Pretoria, where the briefing on a Labour working group was being held, and issues of how government plans to tackle the current high unemployment rates as well as inequality in the country were discussed. Let's quickly take an ad break. We'll have more news today shortly after that. Do stay with us.